Today I complete 80 years of my life. Could I just ask for silence back there? Today I complete 80 years of my life. As I look back on the vast stretch of years that lie behind me and see in clear perspective the history of my early development, I am struck by the change that has taken place both in my own attitude and in the psychology of my countrymen. A change that carries within it a cause of profound tragedy. Our direct contact with the larger world of men was linked up with the contemporary history of the English people whom we came to know in those earlier days. It was mainly through their mighty literature that we formed our ideas with regard to these newcomers to our Indian shores. In those days, the type of learning that was served out to us was neither plentiful nor diverse, nor was the spirit of scientific inquiry very much in evidence. Thus, their scope being strictly limited, the educated of those days had recourse to English language and literature. Their days and nights were eloquent with the stately declamations of Burke, with Macaulay's long rolling sentences, discussions centered upon Shakespeare's drama and Byron's poetry, and above all, upon the large-hearted liberalism of the 19th century English politics. At the time, though tentative attempts were being made to gain our national independence, at heart we had not lost faith in the generosity of the English race. This belief was so firmly rooted in the sentiments of our leaders as to lead them to hope that the victor would of his own grace pave the path of freedom for the vanquished. This belief was based upon the fact that England at the time provided a shelter to all those who had to flee from persecution in their own country. Political martyrs who had suffered for the honor of their people were accorded unreserved welcome at the hands of the English. I was impressed by this evidence of liberal humanity in the character of the English, and thus I was led to set them on the pedestal of my highest respect. This generosity in their national character had not yet been vitiated by imperialistic pride. About this time, as a boy in England, I had the opportunity of listening to the speeches of John Bright, both in and outside Parliament. The large-hearted radical liberalism of those speeches, overflowing all narrow national bounds, had made so deep an impression on my mind that something of it lingers even today, even in these days of graceless disillusionment. Certainly that spirit of abject dependence upon the charity of our rulers was no matter for pride. What was remarkable, however, was the wholehearted way in which we gave our recognition to human greatness even when it revealed itself in the foreigner. The best and noblest gifts of humanity cannot be the monopoly of a particular race or country. Its scope may not be limited, nor may it be regarded as the miser's hoard buried underground. That is why English literature, which nourished our minds in the past, does even now convey its deep resonance to the recesses of our heart. It is difficult to find a suitable Bengali equivalent for the English word civilization. That phase of civilization with which we were familiar in this country has been called by Manu sadachar, literally proper conduct. That is, the conduct prescribed by the tradition of the race. Narrow in themselves, these time-honored social conventions originated and held good in a circumscribed geographical area, in that strip of land, Brahmavarta by name, bound on either side by the rivers Saraswati and Drisavati. That is how a Pharisaic formalism gradually got the upper hand of free thought, and the ideal of proper conduct, which Manu found established in Brahmavarta, steadily degenerated into socialized tyranny. During my boyhood days, the attitude towards the cultured and educated section of Bengal, nurtured on English learning, was charged with a feeling of revolt against these rigid regulations of society. A perusal of what Rajnarayan Bose has written, describing the ways of the educated gentry of those days, will amply bear out what I have said just now. In place of these set codes of conduct, we accepted the ideal of civilization as represented by the English term. In our own family, this change of spirit was welcomed for the sake of its sheer rational and moral force, and its influence was felt in every sphere of our life. Born in that atmosphere, which was moreover colored by our intuitive bias for literature, I naturally set the English on the throne of my heart. Thus passed the first chapters of my life. Then came the parting of ways, accompanied with a painful feeling of disillusion when I began increasingly to discover how easily those who accepted the highest truths of civilization disowned them with impunity whenever questions of national self-interest were involved. There came a time when, perforce, I had to snatch myself away from the mere appreciation of literature. As I emerged into the stark light of bare facts, the sight of the dire poverty of the Indian masses rent my heart. Rudely shaken out of my dreams, I began to realize that perhaps in no other modern state was there such a hopeless dearth of the most elementary needs of existence. And yet it was this country whose resources had fed for so long the wealth and magnificence of the British people. While I was lost in the contemplation of the great world of civilization, I could never have remotely imagined that the great ideals of humanity would end in such ruthless travesty. But today, a glaring example of it stares me in the face in the utter and contemptuous indifference of a so-called civilized race to the well-being of crores of Indian people. That mastery over the machine by which the British have consolidated their sovereignty over their vast empire has been kept a sealed book, to which due access has been denied to this helpless country. And all the time, before our very eyes, Japan has been transforming herself into a mighty and prosperous nation. I have seen with my own eyes the admirable use to which Japan has put in her own country the fruits of this progress. I have also been privileged to witness, while in Moscow, the unsparing energy with which Russia has tried to fight disease and illiteracy, and has succeeded in steadily liquidating ignorance and poverty, wiping off the humiliation from the face of a vast continent. Her civilization is free from all invidious distinction between one class and another, between one sect and another. The rapid and astounding progress achieved by her made me happy and jealous at the same time. One aspect of the Soviet administration which particularly pleased me was that it provided no scope for unseemly conflict of religious differences, nor set one community against another by unbalanced distribution of political favors. That I consider a truly civilized administration which impartially serves the common interests of the people. While other imperialist powers sacrificed the welfare of the subject races to their own national greed, in the USSR, I found a genuine attempt being made to harmonize the interests of the various nationalities that are scattered over its vast area. I saw peoples and tribes who only the other day were nomadic savages, being encouraged and indeed trained to avail themselves freely of the benefits of civilization. Enormous sums are being spent on their education to expedite the process. When I see elsewhere some 200 nationalities, which only a few years ago were at vastly different stages of development, marching ahead in peaceful progress and amity, and when I look about my own country and see a very highly evolved and intellectual people drifting into the disorder of barbarism, I cannot help contrasting the two systems of governments, one based on cooperation, the other on exploitation, which have made such contrary conditions possible. I have also seen Iran, newly awakened to a sense of national self-sufficiency, attempting to fulfill her destiny freed from the deadly grinding stones of two European powers. During my recent visit to that country, I discovered to my delight that Zoroastrians, who once suffered from the fanatical hatred of the major community, and whose rights had been curtailed by the ruling power, were now free from this age-long repression, and that civilized life had established itself in the happy land. It is significant that Iran's good fortune dates from the day when she finally disentangled herself from the meshes of European diplomacy. With all my heart, I wish Iran well. Turning to the neighboring kingdom of Afghanistan, I find that though there is much room for improvement in the field of education and social development, yet she is fortunate in that she can look forward to unending progress. For none of the European powers, boastful of their civilization, has yet succeeded in overwhelming and crushing her possibilities. Thus, while these other countries were marching ahead, India, smothered under the dead weight of British administration, lay static in her utter helplessness. Another great and ancient civilization for whose recent tragic history the British cannot disclaim responsibility is China. To serve their own national profit of the British, They first doped her people with opium and then appropriated a portion of her territory. As the world was about to forget the memory of this outrage, we were painfully surprised by another event. While Japan was quietly devouring North China, her act of wanton aggression was ignored as a minor incident by the veterans of British diplomacy. We have also witnessed from this distance how actively the British statesmen acquiesced in the destruction of the Spanish Republic. On the other hand, we also noted with admiration how a band of valiant Englishmen laid down their lives for Spain. Even though the English had not aroused themselves sufficiently to their sense of responsibility towards China in the Far East, in their own immediate neighborhood, they did not hesitate to sacrifice themselves to the cause of freedom. Such acts of heroism reminded me over again of the true English spirit to which in those early days I had given my full faith, and made me wonder how imperialist greed could bring about so ugly a transformation in the character of so great a race. Such is the tragic tale of that gradual loss of my faith in the claims of the European nations to civilization. In India, the misfortune of being governed by a foreign race is daily brought home to us not only in the callous neglect of such minimum necessities of life as adequate provision for food, clothing, education, and medical facilities for the people, but in an even unhappier form in the way people have divided themselves. The pity of it is that the blame is laid at the door of our own society. So frightful a culmination of the history of our people would never have been possible but for the encouragement it has received from secret influences emanating from high places. One cannot believe that Indians are in any way inferior to the Japanese in intellectual capacity. The most effective difference between these two Eastern peoples is that whereas India lies at the mercy of the British, Japan has been spared the shadow of alien domination. We know what we have been deprived of. That which was truly best in our own civilizations, the upholding of the dignity of human relationships, has no place in the British administration of this country. If in its place they have established, with baton in hand, a reign of law and order, in other words, a policeman's rule, such mockery of civilization can claim no respect from us. It is the mission of civilization to bring unity among people and establish peace and harmony. But in unfortunate India, the social fabric is being rent into shreds by unseemly outbursts of hooliganism, daily growing in intensity, right under the very aegis of law and order. In India, so long as no personal injury is inflicted upon any member of the ruling race, this barbarism seems to be assured of perpetuity, making us ashamed to live under such an administration. And yet, my good fortune has often brought me into close contact with really large-hearted Englishmen. Without the slightest hesitation, I may say that the nobility of their character was without parallel. In no country or community have I come across such greatness of soul. Such examples would not allow me to wholly lose faith in the race which produced them. I had the rare blessing of having Andrews, a real Englishman, a real Christian, and a true man for a very close friend. Today, in the perspective of death, his unselfish and courageous magnanimity shines all the brighter. The whole of India remains indebted to him for innumerable acts of love and devotion. But personally speaking, I am especially beholden to him because he helped me to retain in my old age that feeling of respect for the English race, with which in the past I was inspired by their literature and which I was about to lose completely. I count such Englishmen as Andrews not only as my personal and intimate friends, but as friends of the whole human race. To have known them has been to me a treasured privilege. It is my belief that such Englishmen will save British honor from shipwreck. At any rate, if I had not known them, my despair at the prospect of Western civilization would be unrelieved. In the meanwhile, the demon of barbarity has given up all pretense and has emerged with unconcealed fangs, ready to tear up humanity in an orgy of devastation. From one end of the world to the other, the poisonous fumes of hatred darken the atmosphere. The spirit of violence, which perhaps lay dormant in the psychology of the West, has at last roused itself and desecrates the spirit of man. The wheels of fate will someday compel the English to give up their Indian empire. But what kind of India will they leave behind? What stark misery. When the stream of their centuries' administration runs dry at last, what a waste of mud and filth they will leave behind them. I had at one time believed that the springs of civilization would issue out of the heart of Europe. But today, when I am about to quit the world, that faith has gone bankrupt altogether. As I look around, I see the crumbling ruins of a proud civilization strewed like a vast heap of futility. And yet, I shall not commit the grievous sin of losing faith in man. I would rather look forward to the opening of a new chapter in his history after the cataclysm is over and the atmosphere rendered clean with the spirit of service and sacrifice. Perhaps that dawn will come from this horizon, from the east where the sun rises. A day will come when unvanquished man will retrace his path of conquest despite all barriers to win back his lost human heritage. Today we witness the perils which attend on the insolence of might. One day shall be borne out the full truth of what the Indian sages have proclaimed. By unrighteousness, man prospers, gains what appears desirable, conquers enemies, but perishes at the root.